welcome. And today we got Alison back, because last month you took off and you went to Gobeklitepe, if I'm saying that right, almost at the Syrian border, but it was on the Turkish side, but she's all the way down to the bottom of Turkey. And anyway, I'll let her tell us a little bit about that, because it's just so exciting. She wanted to go because she knew some of those artifacts were in trouble or in danger of being disturbed or destroyed by ISIS and some of the other things over there. But Alison, welcome.
Hello, Steve. Hi.
Good to have you home.
I've been on. And I need to thank you and Barbara and everybody for the wave and waves and waves of support that you sent me, and love and protection. Because honestly, even though I was indeed in southeastern Turkey, right, within earshot of the gunfire on the Syrian side of the border, I still felt utterly protected the whole time I was there. I just went around with this huge smile on my face, with my heart filled with love, in this massive bubble of protection. So honestly, it was fabulous to be there.
Oh,
and actually, the place I went to see is called Gebeklitepe.
Gobeklitepe, okay.
That's the one. It's in southern Anatolia, southeastern Turkey, as we said, and it has the title of being the world's oldest temple. Wow. Because it has been dated to 12,500 years ago, so that's 10,500 BC. The Garden of Eden, called the first ancient Anatolia. And honestly, Steve, when you walk around, you kick a stone, you've just kicked an ancient monument. That the whole place is just filled with ancient monuments.
That's fascinating.
And the people are so gentle and so beautiful. So, they're just the kindest people in the world. The whole thing was just a huge pleasure.
Oh, that's beautiful. We're going to play this video that you have brought us here.
Hi. So, here I am at Gobeklitepe. Described as the world's oldest temple. I think that should be the world's oldest temple so far discovered, but anyway. I'm on top of a limestone ridge, which is surrounded by a plain, a very arid and dry desert-type plain. There's some vegetation, but we're just past high summer. It's incredibly hot, so most of it has turned to straw. The ancients who lived here in those days enjoyed a very different climate. They had a lush climate. They were hunter-gatherers, but the ground was so abundant and the animals so plentiful that they could just eat whatever they wanted. There wasn't a struggle to exist. This meant they could focus on other things, and they focused on the spiritual, clearly, because despite previous academic assumptions that people who lived 12,500 years ago were no more than people who weren't literate, were they stupid or what have you. No, absolutely not. I mean, this place is completely proven that these were highly intelligent and sophisticated people with a great ability to understand and connect with nature. Probably they understood and connected with it better than we do now, because they simply used their guts, instincts and their feelings. They watched nature, they lived with it, they were part of it, and this meant that they could embrace it in a way that really we don't these days. We have become so separate from nature. Our religions have not embraced it in the way that it is apparent that the ancients did. So we're on a limestone ridge on top of a plain on the South Turkey Syria border, and the ancients in 10,500 BC wanted to be even higher, so they piled earth on top of this limestone ridge, hundreds and hundreds of tons of earth, to make it like a pot-bellied hill, as it's called by the locals. This area still has huge spiritual attractions to the local people. When a local person dies, they bring the body here to be buried. When a local woman wants to start a family, for instance, she comes here to pray for fertility. So the associations go back 12,500 years, but they're still here today. So what we're doing really is just appreciating what they did do, and I'll just describe that. So they carved huge stone monoliths in T-shapes. So the top is kind of like a stylized head, and the body appears to be the body of some giant person, an anthropomorphized stone, because there are arms, carved arms coming down and ending in front, just in front of the groin area with the fingers. They put two huge central T-shapes in the middle of an oval enclosure. The oval enclosure has a low dry stone wall, and that incorporates another 10 or 12 of these smaller T-pillows, T-shaped pillars. And so it's all around the central feature of the two big ones in the middle. The dry stone walls were fairly low. Perhaps people sat around and looked at a ritual that happened in the middle. The enclosure D, there are 6 uncovered so far, but just taking enclosure D as being one of the most spectacular. It's oriented in a north-south orientation. So maybe they were looking at what was happening in the north sky or what was happening in the south sky. The sky of that time was very different to the sky we see now. First of all, it was so much brighter because there was no light pollution. Also, because they didn't have any television or anything else to distract them, they would lie and look at the stars as if it were their soap operas. There they would make up stories and connect with the stars, and this created all the myths that we have today. The planets aren't static like the stars, and so they added more stories to it, and they became characters eventually, which emerged in mythology. So maybe the orientation has something to do with that. Certainly the fact that they put height onto this hill, so there was already a ridge. They didn't need to build this high, but they needed to build even higher. So that means they needed that height. That's possibly because they wanted to look at the risings and settings of certain constellations and planets. As you can see, I've got uninterrupted view. So obviously that must have been important to them too. But also, it appears when I'm inside the small area of enclosures, it's apparent that they also dug down, that they may have wanted to create a feeling of being in the earth, and then also obviously they had one of being in the sky, so they were kind of acting as go-betweens, if you like, or mediators between the heaven and the earth. In that case, maybe the enclosures were used to enact rituals between a man and a woman, fertility rites, etc. Maybe the enclosures were all about the audience being part of this, about ritualizing some kind of act and connecting it, being a conduit really to join in with nature. The pillars are all carved with incredible animals, mythical animals, quadrupeds mainly, so four-legged animals. You've got foxes and boars. There are snakes, there are many birds, flamingo-type birds. I mean, just incredible. Like, first of all, it's incredible that without any tools at all, just with flint tools, they managed to carve these huge monoliths. I mean, they're staggeringly high. And then also on top of that, it's not just that they carved the pillars, they also managed to bas relief or carve out these amazing animals on them as well. So the whole thing is just breathtaking. But yeah, there we go. So I'm thrilled to be here. The cosmos has done something amazing to get me here, because the whole area is restricted at the moment because of the dangerous political situation, but here I am. How did I feel when I was in the temple? Incredible. It's overpowering. I got a huge sense of feeling safe and secure, a huge sense of majesty, and a huge sense of being that conduit between the heaven and the earth. It was an amazing feeling.
So we're talking here, Stone Age man organizes themselves into a community to build these clearly religious temples or sanctuaries, whatever you want to call them. There is no evidence of any domestication. So they didn't live on this hill. They lived elsewhere. But they worked together to produce something that, honestly, as you stand there, you go, Oh my God. It's the beauty of it, but also the finish, the quality of the carving, the quality of the animals, the carvings on these T-pillars. Absolutely staggering. You know, how they've done it. It's just phenomenal. Just that this blows me away more than anything. The effort put into it.
That's magical. Very magical. Yeah, well, we've got our roving astrologer, and it sounds like you're going to be out again. Will you get us some more reports like these?
Absolutely.
We love this. We love this. This is you're helping us spread it all over the world in unusual places that we normally wouldn't get to reach. This is awesome.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good. I think it's interesting is to find out what these ancient cultures thought and bring it to the table. You know, so that we consider. I mean, one of the things, Steve, is there was no evidence there of a goddess culture.
Interesting.
What was most interesting and what was most evident was all about animals.
Well, that's what it looks like. All your pictures are all animal related in some way, with the exception of the pillars and so forth.
Yeah. So what they obviously experienced was nature as one, everything blended into one. Possibly they saw these animals as kind of daemons, kind of spirit guides or creatures. Possibly they saw the T-pillars as representing the ancestors. So possibly it was about the ancestors and how they could support them with their current religious or spiritual rituals. They didn't seem to have a great divide between the animal world, the human world, the underworld, the spirit world. I mean, we even have separate names for them, the animal world, the human. But they didn't seem to have that. What I got a great sense of was how they saw themselves completely blended with nature. And the other thing that struck me was the hill that Gebeklitepe is built on. It's a natural hill to start with, but they moved hundreds and hundreds of tons of earth to make it even higher. Now, we're talking Stone Age again, and they moved massive amounts of earth to make it higher. Why? Because they wanted to get closer to the sky. It's on a hill where you've got a 360-degree horizon, so you can see the rising and the setting of the stars. This clearly was very important to them, or why move all this earth? And what I got a sense of was I felt that I was in a sanctuary where I was a conduit for the heaven and the earth. I felt that I was part of a marriage of heaven and earth, that I was bringing nature and the stars and the heaven together in an exploration and an enjoyment and a celebration of how the whole thing is blended. The animals, the sky, the humans, the rock, all blended into one. There was no separation or specialization. It's really spirituality before religion. I think if anybody feels the urge to go, I would say it's quite safe to go still.
Yeah.
I recommend you contact there's an Eastern Turkey tours. I recommend you contact them and get a driver from them. But I would say if you feel the calling like I felt calling, then I would still go to Turkey. It is quite safe at the moment, and it's an incredible experience.
I've presented in Istanbul and Ankara, and I've never felt safer. And of course, they weren't at war at that time. You know, war wasn't all around like it is now, but very, very comfortable there. I will say that. Wonderful people.
You can feel the density and the spiritual. There's a spiritual peace there.
There is.
That I think is just incredible to feel. But I loved it. I'd go back again. I would go back tomorrow. It wouldn't bother me at all.
Well, thanks for bringing all that. It sounds like we're not only evolving forward and everything, but now we're going to have to rewrite history. I like that.
Absolutely.
I like that.
I'm just going to tell you this story very quickly.
Sure.
So they have Turkish women who are working in the dig, in the excavation, sieving all the soil so they can get out all the little bones and bits and pieces. And an anthropologist interviewed these Turkish women and said, what's it like to be working in these digs? You're looking at history, your history. And the Turkish women replied, well, it's exactly the same as my grandmother's house. These are the houses that my grandmother lives in, my mother lived in. Everything's the same. Everything's identical. The cupboard's the same. The cooking pots are the same cooking pots, right, made out of clay. And so the anthropologist said, well, okay, but you haven't mentioned your mother. What pots does your mother use? And they said, oh, well, my mother drives to Ankara and buys stainless steel pots. Now, what's interesting for me here, Steve, is that for 12,500 years, you have the same tradition, in that ancient part of the world where civilization began, if you like, the cradle of civilization, you have the same potter making the same pots. Just recently, only in the last 40 years, the women stop doing that and they drive to Ankara and they buy stainless steel.
40
What
years.
what does it say about progress? What does it say about what we're doing with the planet? What does it say about how we're working against the very slow evolution that the planet probably would prefer us to be in? It's a good thought.
Absolutely amazing. Thanks for being with us, Alison. We really appreciate you being here with all the traveling and so forth to do, and we look forward to your next report too.
Thank you. See you next month.
All right. Thanks, son. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
That's Pavo. Well, back to the studio.